Welcome to Lit&Bruised, an Atlanta literary podcast. I'm Matt Benedictus.
And I'm John Carroll. Hey, y'all. This is going to be an awesome episode. I think you're really going to enjoy this. We did an episode dedicated to the literary journal based here in Atlanta, Gutwrench. And if you're not familiar, you can go to gutwrenchjournal.com and check it out. It's run by local writers, authors, Daniel Lamb and Benjamin Carr. And they brought some guests with them. They brought Randy Osborne, who runs Carapace out of Manuel's Tavern, local monthly storytelling event, which is totally awesome and worth checking out. And another local writer, Maddie Fay. And Randy and Maddie delivered some pieces for us. They read some pieces on the show. They're really cool, and then we really dug in on what Gutwrench Journal was all about. So especially if you're a writer in Atlanta and you're looking to get published, definitely check out gutwrenchjournal.com. Daniel and Benji are awesome, so we hope you enjoy the episode. Good morning, Matt.
Isn't it afternoon?
It's morning for some people.
It's just time.
Service industry folks.
Okay.
You know, they had a long night last night.
This is a weird podcast to listen to if you're just waking up. I'm not going to lie.
True, but, sometimes, a lot of writers do work in the service industry.
Mm-hmm, that is true.
So, that this might resonate with some of you out there. So, good morning. Here we are, Lit and Bruised. But, Matt, I had a confession I wanted to make.
Sweet.
Regarding my intro to writing and the first time I was ever published.
Okay, yes, let's go.
Let me take a sip of water really quick here. I need a wet mouth to talk about this. So I started writing just like in a blog.
Yeah.
And it was a blog spot. And I was just writing, I think I was just like dealing with like my Christianity and like my parents' divorce. And I was all angsty and in my 20s and trying to figure life out. And I had like this 9-to-5 job where I sat in a cubicle. So when I had free time, I would just open up old Blogger and just start typing out my thoughts. And
see how many page views you had?
Yeah, exactly. I have like four, like maybe 4 likes or whatever the equivalent of a like was back then. I know they had something like that, and then maybe a comment or somebody telling you that you suck.
Yeah, Blogspot like is only like worth half a Facebook like.
Yeah, my
if
traffic.
You're looking at digital inflation.
Totally. I mean, my traffic was terrible, but it still gave me a place, give me a platform. My little online diary. It's more or less like a live journal. Anyway, I wrote this essay one morning about losing faith in God and like the view of how people view God or how I viewed God. And I wrote it and I sent it into a Christian magazine.
What magazine?
It's still around. It's called Relevant Magazine.
Oh, Relevant.
Which might not be that relevant.
That was Cameron Strain's publication.
I don't even know who that is, but I submitted it and they published it, but they did remove a paragraph where I compared God to like an alcoholic father.
Oh.
Yeah, and it was...
Relevant would be a magazine that would take a little unkind to that.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a view of God. But, hey, they read the whole piece. Apparently, they liked it. They stuck out that one paragraph. It was this funny metaphor. I liked it, but that was the first time I was ever published. And I'd only been writing for a few years, so I definitely took it to heart. But
was that online or print?
It was online. But they did make a graphic for it.
Oh, sweet.
And I know it doesn't exist anymore. I know it's been taken down at some point over the last 12, 13 years. But it existed. But that was the first time that I was ever published. So I was curious as to what your first publication was. Where were you published in first?
I was... First time, well, in terms of like fiction writing, because I'd been in a couple of religious journals and places kind of like relevant from the being a pastor and all that. But like first time doing like something of a fiction nature, a friend of mine, he had a small little like slam poetry press out of Pennsylvania. And I just sent him a piece and I'm glad it cannot be found anymore. And he published it out and did a little chapbook of it. And I read from it at Wordsmith and at Wordsmith Books. And it was not taken to very kindly.
Oh, I've
It was
heard
a
about this
very
piece.
long masturbation joke that was basically me dealing with religious stuff.
A long masturbation.
Oh
joke.
yeah, I mean, I'm talking. It was just one big masturbation motif. It was just me dealing with everything all at once, and it just came out through just a story involving masturbation and God telling someone their dick wouldn't work anymore.
Whoa.
Yeah, you could just analyze the hell out of that.
Yeah, because I was thinking like spiritual masturbation, which is like
No,
what I used to call.
It was not.
What I used to call church spiritual masturbation, like, or a spiritual circle jerk. You know, it's people all sitting around talking about how awesome they are because they love God. And I was like, what are you doing, though? You're not doing anything. And that used to always make me mad. That's actually why I did mission work till I was 21, but I stopped going to church when I was 18. I was like the heathen missionary, you know, because I was like, oh, you guys don't do anything. Get off your asses and stop singing your songs. But
So after Relevant Magazine, did you seek out to get published anywhere else?
I sent them another piece, and they didn't like it. But then I went back and read it, and I realized that it had nothing to do with like spirituality or God. It was just like some other piece I just randomly had written. I had a strange history of being published. I've not much though, because I rarely submitted. I didn't really care. And then, but
It's a grueling process.
It is. I mean, what's happened to me that was kind of lucky for me is that I had written pieces certain places for certain publications that I had something to do with, you know, like a contributing writer for a site, and those would get picked up by bigger places. So, for instance, Scout Mob back in the day used to aggregate articles from different websites, and so I had written a handful of websites or articles for the website Purge ATL.
Yeah.
And those got picked up by Scout Mob.
Okay.
So in a way, I got I would guess in a very roundabout way get published that way.
But you didn't really seek out many like fiction types of publications, did you?
I've always been a rebel, man. I just do it myself. I just, you know, I look at a magazine, I think I could do this. That's probably not a very good attitude. I think my feelings are different about it now, but I just don't. I write for my own purposes, so more so if I wrote something, it'd be more to put out a chapbook.
Yeah.
Not so much to get published. I'd rather, you know, again, DIY, do it myself in that sense. Or I just, you know, call you up and say, hey, Matt, I want to publish a book. Will you? That's basically what I've done my entire life is just call
that has worked
you.
a couple times.
It keeps working. So, you know, why submit when I can just give it to you and you'll just do it for me? So anyway, but we're talking about that today because we have some wonderful people with us today. We actually have a full apartment here on St. Charles Avenue. Matt, I'm going to let you intro into who are our guests today.
We have the founder of Atlanta-based literary journal Gutwrench. We have Daniel Lamb and multiple guests and friend of the show, Benjamin Carr.
Hi,
Welcome
Benji.
to the show, everybody.
I've never called you Benji. What is that? So yeah, like Ben, Benji, Benjamin. Is that just like people just?
Growing up, my mother called me Benji, but she spelled it differently from the dog. And so now I know where I know someone from based upon what they call me or what time they met me during. So if you grew up with me, then you pretty much call me Benji, or if you're a really good friend of mine, then you call me Benji, unless you want to take me seriously, or you know me from journalism, then you call me Benjamin.
I've always called you Benjamin, but I think I've just known you from writing.
Yeah.
Can I make up new nicknames for you?
No.
They won't be mean. Just like cooler, like something like when I hear Benji, I'm like, they just call him Benji? Like, damn. I just did, but it's like a term of endearment, though.
Well, it's because Matt met me at the reading of the masturbation piece.
Yes.
Back at Wordsmiths in like 2001
Yes.
or something. But yes, but you can call me whatever you like. I mean, it's
Do you mind telling us what your middle name is?
Jeffrey with a J. Don't.
I was going to call you BC. That's what I was going to go with.
Okay. I was like, yeah.
What were you talking about? Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I know. I can help.
Okay.
Anyway, let's get back to Matt's introduction that I so rudely interrupted.
Well, no, and we're also, Daniel, you are the sharpest dressed writer in Atlanta.
So dapper today.
I know.
Jesus.
Yes.
You got like the little like curl on your bangs like coming down. I haven't been able to do that in easily a decade, as we can all see here.
So we're both big fans of Gutwrench Journal, and
We are.
I've started journals before. It's not easy. It's a lot of work. So I always like to kind of start with the question of why start the journal?
We were both refugees, essentially, of a journal that was run out of Wonder Root called Loose Change Magazine.
Oh, yeah.
I had been published by them. Another one of our guests here had been published by them as well. And Daniel was...
I was the assistant fiction editor for a while there, and then their leadership sort of turned over, and they went in a different direction and became more of a sort of avant-garde poetry magazine, which I wasn't really that interested in.
And I couldn't get published by them anymore. And
yeah, they sort of changed up like the audience that they were trying to market to, and also like the writer base that they were trying to capture, and it became more academic.
it seemed like their mission statement had completely changed. And what I was finding in some of the stuff that I was submitting to them or to anyone was that you couldn't get past the academia in order to get published, or that if you tried to read one of their issues or anyone's issues after it had been published, there weren't very many like stories that would grab you, or like you would have to essentially decipher something in order to be able to understand it. And I said, well, why aren't any of these journals just readable? And we were
Did you say that to them? At Wonder Root?
No.
This wasn't a conversation with Wonder Root.
Oh, no.
This
Okay.
was a conversation we had.
Yeah, you weren't just like, I would have loved to have seen that if that had been a conversation with
Yeah,
Wonder
it
Root.
was
You know, we can't read this shit, you know?
It would have been a great panel discussion, right?
Yeah,
No one would have gotten their feelings hurt.
totally.
Well, no, I mean, I'm a gay man. I'm a gay writer, and then they were doing this issue on gay and queer identity, and I submitted to them, and it wasn't like I couldn't even understand their prompt, like the identity of otherness, something like that. It was just this obscure outside language, and I'm like, why don't we just tell stories?
I bet a straight guy made it. A straight guy made the prompt.
Did that even publish? Did that issue even publish?
I believe it did.
Did you edit that?
No.
Did you make the prompt?
I did not. I was involved with that issue, and the writers that I picked were jettisoned from the issue. They didn't publish any fiction. I think. I believe anything that was published ended up being solicitations from the editor, which, they were just cherry-picked, So.
It's interesting how that works. I actually do remember looking into submitting to Wonder Root at some point in time in the late 2000s. And it just from what you're saying, and this just probably goes for all journals or sites like that, is the site is going to skew towards what they are interested in and what they are,
Yeah.
So probably, and I don't even know who the editors were back then, but most likely you probably just had like an academic come in and poetry person. That's just what they wanted to do. And the former editor had probably been a fiction writer, and there you go, and it's fine. So, that makes sense. It's the nature of the beast, really. So,
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I like about y'all is I really love the way you describe what you're looking for.
Nice.
Yes, I love. I'll just read it a little bit because I always love how I just love the way you lay this out. On
Read the whole
site.
thing.
Yes, we seek danger. We want thrill. Give us blood, sex, passion, love, memory, mystery, a ballad that haunts your soul, complicated individuals, twisted plots, true stories, fiction stories, narrative poetry, plain clothes pulp, meat and potato stories. Come here for moments of horror. This is straightforward blood and guts.
Benji wrote that.
And it's just fucking great.
It is.
Yes, because that's just visceral writing. It's like
is.
you want writing that you can feel something from.
Absolutely.
But then also kind of take from, I get that feeling in so many of the stories that I've read through Gutwrench is like that narrative quality of like really painting a good story, almost coming back from like almost the narrative storytelling that writing is based out of.
Yeah. So we actually have a really different philosophy on publishing people, especially if it's something that we don't like or don't want to publish up front. Sometimes we get stuff that we can see potential in. And so we like to start a dialogue with a writer and invite them to meet up for coffee and do a workshop. A lot of the pieces that we've published happened that way. Like Stephen Williams, Asia Arnold, who else?
Jill, I think Jill went
Thomas.
through us. Yeah.
Yeah, we liked what we saw in their writing, but we wanted to push them to develop it more. And so we accepted it on the basis that we'll publish this if you make it good, if you make it better, if you make it what it really deserves to be. So I would say if you guys are down for that, like totally submit to us, because I would say we've probably only rejected about 30% of the things that we've gotten.
That's great.
And we've been lucky to have some really good content come our way, probably because we are different and we're asking for something specific.
Yes.
You have to
It
clear
definitely makes me think of that John Carr's recent piece.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, I was at the show when he read it the first time, and I was like, dude's killing it.
One of the things that Daniel and I started, how we started like the professional aspect of our friendship, was we started workshopping together for the 500 and for other pieces. We would meet at Java Vino or someplace, and we would just do writing prompts. And we would use these things called story dice, where you literally roll the dice and then it gives you the idea of what to go with. We would break it down. We would do 10-minute timed exercises. And then from that, we realized that the work that we were coming up with was better than stuff and more prolific than stuff that we were doing on our own.
Where do you get story dice?
Target.
They're story dice.
Yeah, it's for kids. It's like there's this, like it's this dice that has pictures on it. You can get it in like a little orange pouch, and you roll it out, and it'll give you like 2 random words, and then from that we took our prompts. We didn't use it that often, but yes, the story dice were.
That is awesome.
Is it 12-sided?
No, there were 2 6-sided rather than 1 12-sided.
Okay, I was just checking out. I could just like see like Stephen King like sitting there. He's like, I have no idea what my next book is going to be about. He rolls it, but his are like special. It has like weird
Like
monsters on it. It'll be like
mystical turtle.
yeah, it'll be like it's like clown, alien.
4 boys walking together on a train track.
Yeah,
Yeah. Self-referential.
yeah, exactly. He
Random car on a road.
You know that Stephen King was actually using the story dice and came up with Sharknado. He was like, Shark Tornado, fucking Sharknado. He didn't take a writing credit on it.
Yeah, that was actually the sequel to Dreamcatcher.
Yeah, exactly. Dreamcatcher was like a really like shitty ending, but I really liked that
It was
story.
a cool story.
Dreamcatcher's a terrible movie. Like,
I love it.
The movie is just god awful.
It's pretty bad.
It's fun. I appreciate Stephen King because he's a machine. He's not going for perfection. He's going for just like massive amounts of just like quantity. He's just it's definitely quantity over quality with him. But if you write 5 things, probably one of them is going to be all right.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, writing is kind of just about the work.
exactly.
Constantly.
Man, that motherfucker, Jesus Christ. For every shitty book or movie he has, he's got like 5 more that are just amazing, so.
Yeah.
But Daniel, this is I kind of want to bring it back a little bit to how you guys work with writers on that. I think that's such a great approach because like submitting is kind of a soulless affair mostly.
It is.
I mean, I think about I always found it to be the most depressing part of writing. Like, all right, I'm going to submit to a whole bunch of journals, and then I'm going to wait for them to tell me no, and then I'm going to try and figure out what I did wrong and why they don't like me.
It's like trying to get a job. It's like sending out your resume, and then like who likes doing that? Oh God! And then it's not even like judging you on your work experience. It's like judging you on the vulnerability of your craft. I mean, that's like fuck that, man. That's why I think that's. I give a lot of reasons as to why I don't submit to shit, but that's probably the real fucking reason right there.
It's kind of like being naked in public.
Yeah.
Just like, hey, strangers, look at all this.
It's awesome when you're a kid, but it's kind of weird when you're an adult.
Yeah.
They all say no. No one says why. It's just painful.
And you got to figure it out on your own. And if you had existential problems, they're going to get worse.
Sounds like dating.
Yeah.
It's like they all say no, but they won't tell you why.
Yes.
But that's just such a great approach to be able to just work with writers, just one-on-one. So it's building a relationship and then basically investing, not just in like, hey, we think this will look really good for our new issue. It's like we're investing in our time and work into you as a writer because you can go so much further and we want to be a part of that.
Well, one of the things that we also were able to get a lot of material out of is just the plethora of shows that were going on in the area. We could hear firsthand like what people were doing, and I would go up afterward and I said, has that run anywhere? And then we would be able to cherry pick it. And a lot of times we got really good people who otherwise wouldn't have written at all, like just to appear on the website. That's how we got Diamond. That's also how we got, I think, Elena in the beginning. And
Diamond Lil for anyone who's listening.
yes, Diamond Lil was the first piece we ever published.
And that has an audio behind it too. Is that correct?
It is only audio.
Is it Diamond reading the piece?
No, it's Diamond performing at Carapace.
Okay.
The live show on True Stories on Stage Without Notes, fourth Tuesday of every month at Manuel's Tavern. Diamond, who has since...
Nice plug, by the way. That was slick.
It's almost as though the person who runs the show is behind me,
sitting on the yellow painted couch. Yeah, and Diamond Lil was my neighbor until unfortunately passing away from cancer a couple of years ago. But met some friends and family of Diamond. Very nice people. Sad to hear about the passing. Anyway, that just got stark. Sorry for my lower voice.
No, we were fully prepared to speak to Diamond or speak about Diamond.
The obituary episode was last week. Sorry, that's
You just took it darker.
yeah.
Are you sure you don't want to throw a 9/11 reference in there?
Well,
Never forget.
okay, Diamond, never forget.
Hey, never forget Diamond. There we go.
Never forget Diamond. No. Diamond managed to tell what may be the best story I've ever seen at Carapace ever. It was dark, violent, sad, diverse in terms of what it was about. It is the funniest story about being raped at gunpoint that I've ever heard someone tell. And when we were when we were coming up with our prompt and when we were coming up with the description, we're like, well, what is a way that something can encapsulate all of this, all of the things that we're looking for? And I'm like, well, the person I've ever seen do that best was Diamond.
Yeah.
And so I asked Randy if we could use the recording, and he said yes. And so that's what it did on stage. And then I had to follow her on stage.
Oh, God.
I remember that night.
I was the one drawn right afterward.
I was like simultaneously aghast and also laughing my ass off.
Everyone was.
It was like so strange.
I was at a table of like 5 other gay people, and we're sitting there like, is she doing that? Is she really talking about what she's talking about in the way that she's talking about? Because it was just delightful. Mm-hmm. It was the most delightful rape story. And it's just...
Well, you don't get to say that much.
It's also the ending, too, which is like...
Dear God.
You know, she goes out and looks for another stranger.
Yes.
Well, let's not ruin it for the listeners, because if you want to, go to gutwrenchjournal.com.
Yes.
So, guys, y'all brought some guests with you today.
Yes.
I see 2 lovely people sitting on the big yellow couch. Why don't you all do some intros for us here and introduce us to our guests?
Sure. Who shall I introduce first, Benjamin?
Maddie.
Okay. Maddie Fay, thank you for being here with us today. The first time I saw Maddie perform was actually, I went to see my wife do a storytelling showcase at Kennesaw State, and Sara on the tellers, and Maddie was one of the storytellers, and she told this really, really powerful personal narrative that it really resonated with me, and I think it really resonated with the whole audience that night. And
I cried.
Yeah,
I was sitting there and I cried and found her afterward, and I'm like, everything you said means the world to me. I know I don't know you.
I love that power of when you see someone read something and it just puts a voice to something that you're like, oh, I didn't know this could ever be expressed.
Yeah.
Hey, Maddie, are you gonna make us cry today?
I'm really not trying to.
Okay, well, I'm gonna try to get I might get the tissues out when we go on break here, but I'm just checking it out.
I'm an openly sensitive guy. I've cried before 2:00 before, so I'm totally cool with that.
Yeah, I'm one mimosa deep right now, so I'm on the edge of a breakdown.
I don't drink. I don't cry when I drink.
Oh, really?
I might drink when I cry.
Turn around there.
I cry at the weirdest things. So now we have Maddie Faye on the mic. Welcome.
Thank you.
How was the couch?
It was good. It was a good couch.
Pretty comfortable?
Yeah, I liked it.
Very, very signable.
Signable?
Like you could sign it later?
Yes.
I'm making words up over here. Thank you so much for being on the show, coming to Old St. Charles and coming over to a weird dude's apartment, you know?
Yeah, I had a lot of great opportunities come from. Thanks for the mimosa.
Yeah, you're very welcome. So why don't you just tell us about yourself a little bit? Daniel gave you the intro here, but why don't you tell us about maybe your writing journey and what led you to this microphone?
Well, I don't know. I've been writing, I was kind of raised by the internet because I was hitting it at the time. I was born in 94. So I communicated with people via writing a bunch because I went to a church school and didn't have a lot of friends there. So I was 11 talking to adults on the internet, trying to convince them that I was an adult on the internet. And so I learned how to correspond originally kind of that way. And I have encountered a lot of shows and things in adulthood through theater. I'm a carpenter and an electrician for theater. And so I hang around a bunch of theater people all the time, and they're like, oh, come to this open mic, come to this whatever. And so I would go to shows and see people do stuff and be like, I want to try that.
Theater people are great at kind of helping deal with performance stuff.
Yeah, and I do storytelling. They were saying I was in the KSU Tellers, which I went to KSU for a little while. The storytelling troupe was really cool, and I went to KSU to study design, scenic design, and while I was there, I had a professor for a class I just had to take, a required theater course, who we had to do a storytelling assignment in that class, and he just, worked with me a lot on it, and, talked to me a lot about this, storytelling troupe that he ran, and, so I eventually, put together a story and auditioned for that, and I was in that for a couple years, and we would do storytelling things different places, at the aquarium. I got to be in Story Spot at Dad's, back before. I work for Dad's sometimes now, as a carpenter and stagehand, but, the first time I went to the new location was in Story Spot.
Okay.
Through Tellers, which was wild. My professor was supposed to perform, and then, the day of, he was, really sick, and he was like, do you want to do this? And I was like, okay. And I had, just watched all of Archer, all of Archer at once, and then I did Story Spot, and Amber Nash got up and, did improv to my story, and it was,
That's amazing.
I was so starstruck, I don't know, it was about, this wilderness program I went to, and she was like, oh, I worked at one of those, she was talking to me afterwards, and I was just neat, whoa. So, sorry, I just went off on a whole...
No, that's awesome.
Hey, that's what we wanted. I'm admiring your dad's fucking garage shirt.
Oh, thanks. They're great. They
really
awesome
are.
there.
We've, so I run, it was a literary series, but now it's theater called Transgression. Actually, do you know Elizabeth Jarrett?
Yeah, I've worked with her a bunch.
Yeah, so she's the director for the theater kind of company that we've turned into now. But yeah, she does a lot of the set stuff over there at
I worked
Dad's.
with her at Serenbe and Dad's and probably other places. I feel like I see her around
She's awesome. Yeah, so I work closely with her. But we did a show at Dad's a few years ago, and before Elizabeth had joined us.
That was the dating game, right?
The dating game. But we did it at Dad's, and they were the best venue ever to work with because we hadn't really ever worked with an actual venue per se, because we always did our shows in just interesting spots,
Yeah.
And they were so fun to work with. I actually got to a point the day of the show where I didn't know what to do because they were doing my job for me and doing it so much better than I could do it, because I just make up the things that I do when I'm like, okay, make sure these mics work or whatever. But they've got like a whole crew. They were such a pleasure to work with, so it's cool to hear other people having great experiences working with them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. A lot of theaters I like. Like, I'll be like, oh, I worked here, and people are like, oh, really? But, like, that's never been my experience about Dad's. I'm like, I work at Dad's, and everyone's like, oh, that's awesome. Like, I love Dad's.
Yeah.
Which is cool, because I feel like there's a lot of tendency for everyone to just talk shit about stuff. So it's good to have things where I don't have to defend them to people all the time.
I always feel like for every bad thing that someone says, they should have to follow it up with something good. It's like, man, Billy sucks, but Sarah's awesome. It's like, just, okay, we get it, Billy sucks. Tell us more about Sara. She sounds lovely, Well, what'd you bring to read today?
I have this poem that got put in Gutwrench by these lovely
these gentlemen over here, strapping young lads,
gentlemen of words.
I like that.
Yeah, I think you came up to me after something at Java Monkey maybe, and was like, "Hey, you could submit your stuff." It's really not a good way to be, but I mainly submit after people specifically ask me to. They're like, hey, send me your thing. And I'm like, all right. Like, I'm pretty sure you won't laugh at me for sending it to you since you asked me to.
It's not a bad strategy, though. You just show up. You're like, my shit's so good, people are going to hit me up after this show. What up? I'm going to get the record deal.
I'm just going to get, 3 things published ever. It'll be great.
Just keep doing the shows, and you'll just keep getting more pieces put out there.
Yeah. Daniel, when you saw Maddie read, was she wearing the badass gloves?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, because, if I saw you got up and read, I would honestly be wanting to publish you just firstly alone on those badass gloves.
I wasn't really. I
For
love
our
the
listeners,
gloves.
Maddie is wearing what are those red fingerless gloves. If I was about to have a fight in a video game arcade, not in a video game, but in an arcade, that's what I would want to be wearing.
Yeah, no, I think you cultivate an aura of this person looks like they could fight me, so no one ever tries to fight you. And I don't want to fuck with people. I don't want people to fuck with me.
Yeah.
You ride a motorcycle? You
I
mentioned.
do. Yeah, I just actually ordered a new battery because it's been dead. So I have to, if I want to ride it, run it down a hill and get it going 14 miles per hour and then rev it and start it, which is embarrassing in public.
No, that sounds awesome.
It doesn't you're
You can't
waddling.
leave a situation mad fuck you. You can't,
Doodle.
I gotta go down the hill.
Yeah.
So you don't want to rob a bank because then you have to Fred Flintstone away. Yeah.
But soon I'll have it.
Well, I look forward to seeing this sometime. Maybe we can have you back on the show. Maybe we can just do a little video of just Maddie riding down St. Charles, flicking us the bird.
My friend was like, we need a motorcycle lesbian to be in this music video. And I was like, well, if you insist.
Almost there. Yeah. Anyway, tell us about the piece, though.
Okay. What do I say about it?
Whatever you want.
I don't know.
Do you have an intro for the piece, or do you just want to just
whenever I just get up and I read stuff.
Well, just get up and read it.
Right.
You don't have to get up. You can stay seated if you'd like. But just
a whole
take it away.
Situation. Hang out with me. A text I send a lot. A little demanding, but always sincere. It means, I like your company, or I miss the way your nose crinkles when you laugh, or there's this new thing I want to try, and I want to try it with you. My heart stretches years and states and oceans, and I try to keep the people I love as close as I can. Because their brains are magic, because I like their insight, because so many of us are lost boys whose only real family is each other. Because waking up to another friend's picture on a Facebook memorial post becomes an avalanche of every phone call I should have made. Hang out with me always means I want to see you. But sometimes it also means I don't like the way your new boyfriend talks to you, or none of us have seen you around lately, or you've stopped eating again, and what kind of friend would I be if I just pretended not to notice? And we don't have to talk about anything you don't want to. Just get in my car, I'll pack us both lunches, and we can drive to the mountains. I'll remind you of the reasons you are good, the ways you have touched my life, and why I'm glad to have you in it. We'll make really exciting plans, so tomorrow can stop looking at you and licking its teeth. I won't pretend my love can save you, but some things you can't do on your own, and I will help you find help. Some days you are the brightest thing about this world, and it would never be the same for losing you so soon. If everyone who hurts like you dies from it, there will be no one left standing at the other side, reaching out an arm for those who come next, and the world will be left to the people who inherited bridges. I like your company, and I would miss the way your nose crinkles when you laugh, and there are still so many new things you have not yet tried. So come over, or call me, I'll come get you. You can play with my dogs, we can count the stars, I can lock up my knives, you can sleep in my room, just hang out with me a little bit longer.
That was amazing.
Thanks.
You're like the best friend ever.
And I have like 3, like at this point, like I've really, since writing that poem, had to narrow like what I consider friend because of like being really accessible in that way. But like also, I don't know, like, not to be like, but like a bunch of my friends have died like super young, and so like I do have this like, if you need me, like you call me, because like I don't want to like miss a call and like wake up the next morning and find out like something happened, you know?
Yeah.
Like I'd rather like be tired and grumpy than like, and like I might be annoyed at someone and I might be like I need space, but like I will always in the end of the day like try to, yeah.
It's interesting, you know, how that goes, because I've always felt slightly estranged from my family, you know, living in Georgia. Most of my family is in another state. And it's funny becoming an adult and being an adult for a long time, and you realize that you cultivate your family in a lot of ways. You know, you create your own through these friendships, and then you kind of wake up one day and you realize that you're closer to these people that were once strangers than you are to your own family sometimes.
Yeah, well, because you're like sharing, you know, situations, and like you come together like for a reason. Like my friends are all like artists and like whatever, and they share struggles with me that like it's like hard to like explain to someone, and you don't really want to. You don't want to be like, all right, I'm gonna sit you down and fill you in. Like it's just nice to have people who get it, who you can still be like, it's not like we're all like sitting around being moody all the time. Like poetry is kind of the only time I'm like real serious. Like the rest of the time we like fuck around, like they're all like stand-up comics, we like make puppets, like but like it's nice to have that baseline of understanding. So like if I'm being weird one day, you don't like ask me a bunch of stupid questions. We can just like go from
They don't write you off in your times of need, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. You know, I think about it a lot in terms of friends that, and I don't know if I'd be as dramatic to say who saved my life, but potentially, you know, cut it off at the pass, man. You know, hard times, and having those people that you can lean on, and someone who's like, hang out with me, because I've definitely had some of those friends when in my hard times say, hang out with me, get the fuck out of the house, come on, let's go do something. And then, you know, you do that enough times, and you kind of wake up one day and you're like, hey, feeling a lot better today.
Yeah.
You know, it definitely fucking goes the distance.
Yeah, like had people do that for me. Like my best friend who drew this tattoo was like, I was just in a shit place and like wanted to lay on the floor and like drink sangria and like not do anything, and like she like took me to a lake and like we went out like hiking and stuff like all the fucking time, and then eventually I was like, all right, like I'm in this pattern, like things are good, like, and like now like, you know, I'm really like glad like things are good, and I'm like glad that I like got out of that time, because like it would have sucked if that was where it ended and I hadn't got to see like everything else I saw. So like
definitely. Well, that's an amazing piece, and that piece is on Gutwrench.
Yes, it's one of the 2 pieces by Maddie on Gutwrench.
Is it just in text format?
Yes.
Y'all should get a recording of that shit.
That's why we're here.
Oh, you're gonna steal our recording?
No,
I'm just playing.
but we're going to direct people to it.
I'm sure Matt can chop that up too.
Yeah,
you know. Good point. Well played. Fuck off. Well, Maddie, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your words with us. They were really amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Randy, you gotta follow that shit, man.
I gotta leave now.
Well, and if you're listening, you hear Randy on the couch, and we're gonna have Benjamin Carr do Randy's intro.
Randy Osborne is one of the best writers in Atlanta, if not the best writer in Atlanta. He runs Carapace, which, as I said, is a story slam on the fourth Tuesday of every month at Manuel's Tavern at 7 p.m. I met him through Write Club, I believe, but it turned out that I had known him from his byline for, maybe 15 years. He started... the first time I read his work was in a weekly newspaper, now long defunct, called Poets, Artists, and Madmen. And he's also written for Creative Loafing and lots of other places. And one of the things that we try to do at Gutwrench is to literally wrench out someone's guts. And his stories, no matter what form they take or where they come from, tend to do that. And so he said to me one day, because I was interested in having him on the site, that he had been working on a project. And he wondered if we'd be interested in seeing it. And fuck yes. And so that is how we ended up publishing Randy Osborne.
What pieces have you published of his?
Just the one so far.
What's it called?
Grousewing Barrel, a Letter.
Nice. Randy Osborne.
Yes. Hi.
Hey.
Thanks for having me here.
Thanks for hanging with us, man. You know, it's funny. I have known about you for, man, I don't know, 8 years probably. And I feel like I always kind of talk to you in passing. And even when you got here, I realized that I don't think we've ever formally been introduced. So, Randy, I'm John Carroll.
Yeah, nice to meet you again.
It's great to meet you, too. Thank you for coming over and joining us on the podcast. And this is Matt DeBenedictis. You know, I think you guys actually formerly met.
Yes.
Or formally. There we go. Formerly, not
both,
formerly.
right?
Yeah, both.
They both work.
So, anyway, thank you so much for coming on the show. I mean, you are... I feel like you are an Atlanta legend, and I don't say that lightly. I don't just kind of throw out shit like that. In a way that you just mind your own business and do your thing and just create work and run shows and write things. And that is, I admire that a lot as someone who's, you're not looking for the spotlight. You're just there because you love creating things. And that's really impressive to me. So, and, you know, for guys like me, I look up to guys like you and I'm like, thank you. Thank you for kind of blazing that trail and setting that example of how to do something because you love it, but not because you're driven by some sort of spotlight or fame or ego kind of thing. So that's really cool.
Yeah, thank you. That's really sweet. I think it has a lot to do with being born in the Midwest. I always say, you know, I come from stolid farm people.
Yeah,
I wasn't raised on
definitely.
a farm, but everybody I grew up around had a very nose to the grindstone, get the work done
Definitely.
attitude.
Where are you from?
Illinois, Rockford, Illinois.
Okay.
Yeah, it's about 90 miles from Chicago.
What is Rockford known for? I'm familiar with it, but I don't know what it's known for.
It's the Forest City.
Okay.
Yeah, it was the Forest City. I think it still is. It's coming back. But when I was a kid, Dutch elm disease struck the city, and it was going around the country, but it was especially bad for the Forest City, after all. And my childhood was filled with this racket of chainsaws and big trees coming down. They were trying to saw the trees down before the disease spread to other trees.
Oh, wow.
So I was surrounded by botanical death when I was a kid.
Botanical death. I like that.
Well, I can't make
I
it
am
more.
starting a death metal band now.
Yeah.
See, the majority of what I know Rockford for is from A League of Their Own, because the Rockford Peaches are from there. I assumed that that's what you were about to say.
Yeah. Well, it's got Iceberg Slim, the pimp, who wrote quite a few books. He was born there. His mother took him away from there because she had a bad romantic relationship, and in many of his books he reminisces fondly about his days as a boy in Rockford.
Learning to be a pimp.
Yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't help myself.
No, seriously, our listeners, like Iceberg Slim, read his stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, very good writer, considering. I mean, it didn't really seem like he had literary ambitions. He just wanted to tell stories, and I think some of the best stuff comes out of people like that.
Yeah, like they're just the natural storyteller. They weren't groomed for it. It's just coming out of their soul. So
yeah, I think you have to really want something to keep at it as long as many of our writers do. I mean, I've talked to a lot of younger writers. Pretty much every writer I talk to is younger, actually. And they speak about this a lot. Like, how do I get going? How do I start? And it's hard to be too polite about that, but I have to just tell them, well, if you don't want to do it, don't do it. If you want to do it, do it. Kind of like anything else. When you wake up in the morning and it's the weekend, you do what you want to do.
Yeah.
If writing isn't a thing that you want to go to. So I taught at Emory for a while, and one of the problems that I had with it, one of the difficult things about it, the hardest thing really, these were adult students, so it wasn't, kids whose parents were paying their way. These are people who paid to be there.
Get there, yeah.
I would often be at the blackboard and trying to explain something, and I remember my turning point was one day I said, now you may not realize this about your work until the 5th or 6th draft. And I looked around the room and all these faces fell. And I thought, there is not going to be a 5th or 6th draft for these people unless it's assigned. There might not even be a 2nd draft. There might not even be a 1st unless it's assigned. And it made me just tremendously sad. It's one of the stories I like a lot. There's a writer who's from around here, from the South anyway, Charlie Smith. He's pretty much unknown, but if you go Google him or go look on Amazon, tremendously talented guy, excellent critical reviews. Wrote a book called Shinehawk, which is for me was kind of a life-changing novel. There's a story about him when I knew somebody who happened to be in college with him, and he said we all showed up for the creative writing class, and we're all sitting there waiting to be told what to do, and Charlie's sitting there with the manuscript about a half a foot thick that he wants the teacher to read, that he brought with him, that he'd just been working on. And I thought, well, that's kind of the difference, isn't it? Sitting there and waiting to be told what to do, and then just doing something and seeing how it works out.
That's one of the hardest parts of writing is basically the discipline that's needed.
Yeah, I always say it's mostly stamina. Like we were saying earlier, if you do enough stuff, some of it's going to be good.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I don't know, was it Mickey Mantle, one of the baseball players? I don't know sports that well, but he had a home run record, but he also had a strikeout record because he was just up at bat more times. So he's going to succeed, and that's kind of goes to what we were starting to talk about earlier, is that nose to the grindstone kind of.
Yeah, I think with any kind of creative project, passion project, I know some people hate that word, but it's just doing it. Like, get out there and make a bunch of mistakes, fail a lot, because I think for everybody, but even maybe the younger generations, with mine going back, people don't want to fail. They look at failure as a bad word, and I always just kind of look at failure as a learning curve. Like, hey, if you do something and it doesn't work out, you just learned a really valuable lesson. But if you quit, then you can't apply that lesson in the future. So if you just keep going and making mistakes and having fun doing it and go, no, all right, well, I learned how not to do that, or not to do that ever again, or whatever it might be. It just makes your next project or your next event or maybe your next story that many times better,
Yeah.
And that's kind of the fun thing. But yeah, it's the stamina game. It's like boxing, how many rounds are you going to last, man,
Yeah.
And if you can last to the final one, I mean, you kind of win there, whether you get chosen by decision or not, you still made it through. And I don't know, I like it. I think it's fun.
Yeah, I always tell writers it's like a sport, and you should train for it accordingly. Like, be used to being on your ass for a long time, and be used to balling paper up and throwing it away and crying a little bit, or maybe a lot. But you will get used to it, and you'll create something. Something will come out of it. And it's I don't know how to get around that rule.
Yeah. You can't.
Yeah, it's never worked for me.
What other sports analogies can we make up for this? It's like stock car racing when you spin out and I don't know. I'm just trying to make up analogies. You got one?
Not an analogy, but my mind kind of goes towards in this. It's like there's two aspects. There's the constant that you need to be doing, setting up the workflow, continually working. But then there's also the social community aspect that's really important because writing in itself is a very solitude thing. But if you just do the solitude part, you really you miss a lot. Mm-hmm. You miss a lot from help that you can get from other people. Learning new types of ways to write, and you lose that, and that's one of the hardest parts I think is balancing both of those, because when you get in the zone of the work zone you can just do that. So it's you actually need to set up honest flesh and blood distractions, not Facebook, not any of that shit. Go out to events, go meet people, other writers, and give them your stuff to read and figure it all out together.
Meet Daniel Lamb and Benjamin Carr for coffee so they can critique your piece and get it published.
Yes.
Look at that. You like that? You guys like that segue? That was pretty good. Well, Randy, what have you brought for us today?
Well, as Benjamin kindly said in his introduction, which was very sweet, I've brought Grouse Wing Barrel, a letter, which came about when Benjamin and I were talking about me possibly submitting something, and I said, well, I have this thing that I've been working on. It's an essay, it's a true story about something from my childhood and beyond. I always try not to stay in childhood too long because it's hard to write childhood. Kids are pretty boring.
Yeah.
They're just dull.
Yeah.
And so you got to get out of there pretty soon, or you're going to bore the reader.
It's not your fault, little Timmy. You're boring.
Yeah. Well, I was boring as a kid, too.
Sorry, little Billy. Fuck you, man. You ain't worth the book. Well, I agree. I understand. I mean, I ran my mouth and played with Ninja Turtles. That was about the extent of the excitement there.
Right. Yeah.
I flicked off a bus driver once.
Yeah.
That was kind of cool. Oh, it didn't go well at all. Grounded for a week. And she called me an albino. She looked up she found out my name from one of the kids on the school bus and told them my name. The lady went through the phone book and she called my house. Fuck you, Karen Geyer. Karen Geyer gave her my name. She looked up my name in the phone book and called my parents, and I answered the phone. And I went and gave Mom and Dad the phone, but then I stayed upstairs on the other line. And she literally said, does your son have white hair? Because I'm very blonde. You can't tell these days because I have no hair. But yeah, that was pretty cool. I mean, hey, I'm 36. I'm still talking about something I did when I was 10, so that's not too bad. That's pretty exciting. But, that's like the pinnacle, Randy. So anyway, Randy, we're so excited to hear you read. Go ahead and... Oh, one question before you start. How many drafts? What draft is this?
This probably went through about 15 or 16.
Y'all, listen up. Just keep listening if you've made it this far in the show. I mean, 15 drafts, this shit's going to be freaking insane.
I never should have said that, I guess.
I'm sorry. I mean, 15 drafts? Jesus, that's amazing. Anyway, Randy, go ahead and take it away.
Okay. That's pretty common for me, that many drafts. Usually I have, like with this one, I had the last line in my head, but I had to back into the rest of it. So anyway, Grouse Wing Barrel, a letter. And this has two epigraphs at the top, which may be one too many. One is from Carrie Hubner, the Nevada Department of Wildlife biologist. She says, from one wing, you can determine whether it's a male or a female. If it's a female, you can even determine whether she had a successful brood or not. And you can tell if it's a juvenile bird. And the other quote is from Kathleen Stewart, who is an ethnographer who wrote a book about living in Appalachia. And she says, rogue intensities roam the streets of the ordinary. I'm going to marry that boy, you promised the grown-ups. Or so I was told later, back home. Maybe impulse drove you to blurt how your future looked in a passing moment. Or maybe at age 10, an excitable girl, you actually saw the future, whole and busy and colorful. Did you know when we met that summer that my immediate family had just exploded. Dad gone adrift post-divorce. Mom free of the drunk at last. She's edgy, love-haunted, Salem chain-smoking. Here's me in 1961, the sad first grader from Illinois, arrived with his grandparents for a week with Virginia mountain kin. He shuffles from the gas station, peels the wrap off a popsicle, cuts across the outfield, past the tomboy, who fist smacks her mitt, waiting for the play. He feels her gaze on the back of his legs. Suddenly she's in front of him. Gimme a bite. Her half smile almost a sneer. Sandy hair in her face, eyes glittery behind, like a hidden animal. The game stops. I want a bite. Her teeth sink into the icy pillar, an almost inaudible crunch. She tilts her head, lips tight, savoring. She swoons, whips back the hair, and those eyes flash open. Now you've got to give me a kiss. He runs. At bedtime, she shows up again. Sally, the big people know her name, still wants a kiss. The big people are too amused. They fail to defend him, and he scrambles under the blankets. She dives in. Amid their tussle, air under the fabric quickly turns humid. He smells grass, dirt, the rhubarby tang of girl. Sally gets what she came for. You take me hiking. We flick Japanese beetles into a pond, and the trout rise, a swirly, slapping froth, and then gone. The trout knows nothing of the beetle's life on the bush, nor does the beetle know of the bush's root system, only the delicious leaves, nor does the bush know of the antlered buck's terror as it clambers past and the gunshots ring. Nor do we, as by then we're on a distant hillside, watching the Holsteins graze. You point out the salt block, sculpted by cows lapping into an exotic shape, a smooth glide that I will one day startle myself to recall when studying the body of a nude woman. All the matter in the mattering world matters to us. The salt block wants our tongues. Wordlessly, we're on hands and knees, faces against the gooey slick, a distracting texture that flavor must find its way through. Bits of straw, black specks in the slurped ivory. We rotate strokes, ecstatic. You watch me, I watch you. We can't stop. Years pass. Sally's in high school, my grandmother Madeline tells me, her finger tracing lines on the handwritten letter. I picture you, but fading. More years. Sally's married now, Mad says. I register the news as a sort of wonder shaded with betrayal, mild. Then Sally has a little girl of her own. I graduate high school. Jump to 1988. Grandmother Mad's in the hospital, her colon ruptured. Coma, the doctors say. Slim chance. My Uncle Theodore is delayed, in Virginia, oddly enough, where he's visiting our people. But he hits town the second afternoon when my grandmother has miraculously awakened. He tugs me into the bright hall. Don't tell Mad, he said. Sally's dead. In the following weeks, I used genealogy websites to trace how we're related. Did you know, or was it as much a blur for you as for me, that my grandmother Mad's brother was the husband of your father's sister? More than enough distance on the family tree for us, anyway. Marry that boy. I sift newspaper clippings and righteously fume at the description of you. Thin blonde, say the neighbors. Wild, volatile, irrational. Someone who claims to know you well says you never grew up. A journalist myself, I understand the grabby, often slapdash nature of reporting. Fragmentary, steps removed from a reality that's ungraspable to start with. I understand, and still I fume. The Virginia clan informs me that you, quote, got interested with the dope crowd early on. Estranged from your husband, you have a pretty brunette daughter, 16. She appeared normal, the newspaper says. The daughter is charged with your murder, small caliber handgun, multiple bullets to the head. I ransack the internet for details about you. I find the obituary for your mother, Eleanor, who died, quote, unexpectedly at age 82 in February 2011. She loved her 7 children, also gardening, animals, and Elton, her husband, for 65 years. I find the obituary for Elton, 86, who followed his wife in June of the same year. It's proof. It's an example. One happening leads to another, I guess. Any effect depends on its cause. But doesn't cause depend just as much on effect? Neither takes priority. They both dissolve in an embrace. And this is how I stop time. Just not for very long. Radiant, youthful Eleanor, your mother in a photo that you may have seen, cradles a puppy. In one that you likely didn't see, your dad, Elton, bald, speckled, perhaps arthritic, digs into a Christmas gift bag. Of you, I can find no photos. At this moment, I feel helpless that I'm not able to visualize you, and ridiculous admitting how long you've been with me, and embarrassed by trying to say in what way you've been present. You peered over my shoulder at my slippery firstborn, red and squealing. You nodded silent when I acknowledged my first gray hair and plucked it. I'm better at perceiving absence, vastly much more of it, maybe that's why, than what's in front of me. Is it preferable to die a certain way? Would I rather perish in a head-on crash, mangled meat, or scream into oblivion, tumor sunk, entubed, and beeping on the crackly institutional slab with their goddamn TV in my face? This is from Eleanor's obituary. We recall occasions while growing up when our mother would take in friends who had nowhere to go. You rode with me west when I wandered, another marriage kaput. One morning near the park where I had pulled over to sleep, I watched the hunter empty his bag of birds onto a table. His dog circled madly. The hunter unsheathed his knife and inserted the blade's tip into the shoulder wedge of each bird, one by one, wrenching loose the feathery flaps. They came away bloodless every time. He tossed the wings into the collection barrel, which I hadn't noticed until then. I touch my companion's thigh in the winter dark. She stirs and whispers, "Your hand, hot." I've experienced the heat by placing my palm on my own bare shoulder, and I want the experience to be hers also. It's a peculiar fever I've had since a boy. Doesn't register on a thermometer. I used to fantasize throwing myself naked into a snowdrift, the hiss and great clouds of steam. Now I flatten my hand against the wall, above the bed, and I touch her again. She says, cool. Still groggy, let her sleep. I feel her, she feels me. We feel each other mutually and ourselves individual, apart. I feel the wall, but the wall can't feel me. Then she feels me and feels by way of me, who has changed the wall. So many things are like this. Your daughter works out a plea bargain and serves time. I hear from the Virginia people that she's living in Roanoke, not far from the trout pond and our Holsteins. One more image. Coy leaves hide clusters of conquered grapes, thick with promise. The fog on their surfaces picks up our fingerprints, proof of contact. Next, the evidence is partway inside our bodies. Between our teeth, the grapes pop, sweet and sudden and voluptuous. We chew them down to their bitter, irreducible skins.
Wow. That is awesome.
Oh,
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Do you feel that you have like a Southern Gothic feel after being in the South, like in your writing?
Yeah, I don't know if that did infuse that somewhat. I've always been attracted to, not exactly horror stories, but I grew up on Hawthorne and Poe. My grandmother read me a lot of that stuff. I was raised by her pretty much into my adult life, my young adult life. Yeah, and she also read me a lot of True Detective magazines. They were always lying around the house, with the lurid pictures and bodies in the snow and that sort of thing. So I got the sort of the classical literature, and there was a lot of mythology in there too, and also the Bible. She liked the Bible, only the Old Testament, not the New Testament. too kind.
Wow.
So I was kind of raised in a dark environment. I loved it. I loved my childhood, and I loved her dearly. But she had a certain streak.
Yeah, the imagery and the way that you paint a picture when you write is very reminiscent to me. You know, when I hear these things, I was there's a new Southern Gothic writer I was recently turned on to, and I cannot remember his name because it is bizarre. And your stories are more complex than his, but the way that he described scenery was very similar, you know. So no, I really enjoyed that a lot. I really like Southern Gothic stuff. Maybe I just try to also shoehorn things in there that I think like that kind of sounds like Southern Gothic. I'm just gonna get into that. No, but it's a beautiful story though. Yeah.
Thanks. It's really hard to not follow those kind of patterns. Just to say, oh, I want to sound like, I don't know, whoever I'm reading that week, if they happen to be good. But I am attracted to what people would call Southern Gothic literature, but so much of other stuff too. I mean, I wouldn't say it's a strong influence.
Yeah, you're like, I'm creating my own genre, Midwestern Gothic literature.
Yeah. That's actually this essay is in a book that I'm shopping around, and I have an agent. She's supposedly shopping it around.
Yeah,
I don't know about that, but and the name of the book is Over the River and Stabbed to Death.
Okay.
So
just rolls off the tongue.
Yeah. But when I'm pitching it, I describe it as a Midwestern Gothic story.
Hey, look at that. Yeah. I was just making it up. Yeah. So that's kind of, it had that feel to it.
It was definitely Gothic. One of the stories in the book deals with, well, many of them deal with my grandmother, Mad. One of the things that she used to do, she'd be vacuuming or sweeping the floor, doing the dishes, sewing. She would look up and look me directly in the eye and say, "God will give you blood to drink." And then she'd go back to her sewing or whatever she was doing.
Oh, wow. That's weird.
Oh, wow.
And she was doing it as a reminder of a scene in The House of the Seven Gables where one of the characters is wrongly put to death and says to the judge, "God will give you blood to drink." And later the judge, who manages to get his hands on the now dead man's property, has a big housewarming party, and he's found face down with a cerebral hemorrhage and blood spurting out of his mouth.
Jeez, that's a fun little vision there.
You guys were giving me shit for talking about obituaries. I mean, Jesus, should have brought Randy on for that episode.
That is some straight. As someone who is from Ohio, that is some straight Midwestern stuff.
Yeah, and I just loved her so much, and I think that she got into my bones and flesh in that way. I love biblical, what you would call biblical writing, that with that cadence, and especially the King James when it hasn't been totally corrupted by some interpreter. I really like. There's a writer, Joni Tevis, who lives, I think, right down the road in Greenville. I think she lives in Greenville. And her writing, she's a nonfiction writer mostly, and her writing has that cadence to it. And I asked her about it once because we became acquaintances. I wouldn't say friends, but we became acquaintances. And I asked her about it. She said, "Well, I read my Bible every day, and I'm sure that it's getting into my prose." And I thought, wow, I wish I could find more of that.
Yeah.
Certainly I'm not capable of doing it, but I would like to read more of it.
I actually went to a Southern Baptist school when I was a kid, and they were a KJV-only school, but not just for the literary prowess of that version, but because they were like, it's the one true version. It's God's holy version. But it was interesting because I had a lot of...
I love that word begat.
My stepbrother had the same thing. He's like, that's the version that God speaks in. And I was like, are you kidding?
All right. Did you realize that Shakespeare actually wrote a good portion of that? But it was interesting, though, because it is a beautiful translation. If you're just looking at it not as like the end-all, be-all of spirituality and books, it's just this... I look at the Bible as like, this is a book that people wrote, and it has a crazy following, and that's whatever. I mean, hey, man, Twilight fans are kind of weird, too. But the Bible, it's so interesting to me. And then I had to memorize a lot of things out of the KJV and have to recite them for school due to like Bible classes and things like that. And at the time, you're a kid, you fucking hate it. But looking back on it, I'm not upset that I went through it because I don't really remember how much it annoyed me. But it was just, it's kind of, it's a weird thing, you know, and but it's interesting.
Yeah, I have a funny Bible story that just happened recently. I'm a big fan of Sherwood Anderson, who's another Midwestern fella. And one of his books is pretty hard to find. It's called A New Testament, and it's him publishing what he also called Midwestern chants, and they have this biblical cadence to it. And I only read a couple online that I was able to find, and I really wanted the book. So the only place I could find it was like ABE Books or one of the used book websites. It was ridiculously expensive. So I went back to Amazon. And it turns out Amazon had a version that was, you know, how they reproduce the old versions and they print them as a paperback, and you could buy them for like $6.95 or whatever. So I bought it. It's A New Testament by Sherwood Anderson. I bought it, and it arrived. I thought, man, this is really thick. Shouldn't be this thick. And the first page, I saw all the begats and the begats and the begats, and I thought, well, maybe he did some of that too. It's the New Testament. It says right on the front, A New Testament by Sherwood Anderson, and you get in there, it's the Bible.
The actual New Testament.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was hilarious.
So like he basically was like, I'm going to write this again.
Oh, no.
No, it was
It was a publisher mistake.
Yeah,
I thought.
it was a mistake. The publisher actually let it go through that way. I guess they thought Sherwood Anderson wrote the Bible or something.
Wow.
That's amazing.
I mean, and I returned it to Amazon, and they asked why, and I said, I have the best reason ever. This isn't the book that it says on the cover. It wasn't torn or damaged.
And they're like, well, how do
anything.
you know? And you're like, well, it's kind of the most popular book of all time.
Yeah.
That's between these pages. Question, why was your grandmother, why was she only into the Old Testament? Because I feel like I hear people that are like only into the New Testament, never the blood and guts and gore of the Old Testament. Why? What was her deal?
She liked suffering. She liked to see suffering. We lived on a corner house, and it was a blind corner. There were no stop signs either way, and every once in a while, there'd be a huge collision. And she would say, "Oh, McKay," her nickname for me was McKay, "go out and see what you can see." And I came back, and was there any blood? Were they badly hurt? And she's like grinning ear to ear while she's asking me this.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's kind of sadistic.
Yeah, and she was a very kind person. I mean,
Yeah.
I lived with her and her two older children, my aunt and uncle, but they were close enough to be brothers and sisters to me. She was yelling at us all the time because she had a hard time after she got divorced as well. But I never saw her strike anyone or give any overt signs that she loved to see suffering and strife and turmoil. And
There's a Midwestern macabre almost.
yeah,
I think it's almost kind of built in.
yeah.
Kind of manifest in dark humor, I think, in a lot of people. But yeah, it's definitely a common thread.
Yeah.
It's kind of like being British. You know? I mean, but hey, who are we to judge? I mean, this is some time ago. That was a different time. And, you know, your grandmother talking about, hey, did this happen? Did that happen? What are the details of it? But then we fire up Netflix and watch some fucked up, crazy true crime shit.
No, not even Netflix, like the stuff you watch on YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, we are so desensitized in 2018 versus like 60s, 70s, but you're probably talking about.
1986, when I was 10 years old, we were renting Faces of Death. Like, it's just like at the video store all the time. Like, just grab
dark shit.
Dark shit. The thing about blood, the thing about horror, the thing about just visceral feeling is that it connects all of us and like to something that is primal.
Yeah.
And driven and passionate, hot and alive. It's awesome.
Yeah. It took me a long time to figure that out about my grandmother. That the reason I wasn't seeing any sadism in her, as much as she enjoyed seeing suffering, is I was just thinking about it on my own one day and connected it up with her. I think I was reading a story about someone being tortured. And I thought, well, that's it, isn't it? Because you can't get out of your body, and people can hurt your body, and there's nowhere you can go. And someday you're going to die from something very similar, perhaps, to what they're doing to you. And and there's no escape from that. I think that was her sensibility. And it wasn't that she enjoyed suffering. It's just it seemed to say something real about the way people live with each other.
The original trap.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is an inevitable.
Yeah.
You know, it's something's going to get you. You just don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you may be gotten in many smaller but very painful ways before that happens.
Sure.
And I think that's what she liked to stare in the face of. I think she almost regarded it as something spiritual.
Well, there is a side to that in my mind of spirituality is in terms of being present and accepting that. You know, it's not separating your mind away from that, but just accepting the pain as to what it is. Because even if it's awful, it's still a reminder that you're still alive.
Yeah.
You're here. This is a sign that you're here. Mm-hmm. This hurts. And
like
pain,
getting a tattoo or getting broken up with.
And pain is a good thing. It lets you know that it hurts and that there's something wrong, you know, and a lot of people don't want to feel pain. But if you cut your hand and you didn't know you cut your hand because it didn't hurt, something bad could happen to you that would further, you know, impair you versus like, oh shit, I cut my hand, that hurt, I should take care of that, you know. So pain is a weird thing, but it's definitely you don't want it, but man, when it comes around, at least it lets you know that something's going on. It's like the fire alarm going off, you know. So
it became for her a kind of compassion.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, compassion, like Benjamin was saying, passion, and then there's compassion where you feel the passion with someone else.
Yeah.
And it could be the passion of great suffering and pain. It doesn't always have to be the delightful thing that the self-helpers tell us it is. Yeah. But the other thing my grandmother did once, and this was, my aunt and uncle still talk about this. We lived 1 block from Kishwaukee Street, very busy thoroughfare, and a woman was struck while going across the street and killed. Groceries flying everywhere. Of course, I was assigned to run up and see what I could see. But my grandmother claimed that she heard Jennifer Johnson, we found out her name in the paper the next day, heard Jenny Johnson scream. And I asked my grandmother, what did it sound like? And she did the scream, and it was blood-curdling. And every once in a while I'd ask her to do it again just to see if she could duplicate it. And she did, and I thought, she either heard that or she's a better actress than I ever thought.
What was your grandmother's name?
Madeline Harlow.
Sounds like a very interesting human being.
Yeah, we called her Mad.
Yeah.
One of the things that she did that I didn't find out about until after her death, and I probably am backing into the story and telling it wrong. Okay, us kids like to watch horror movies, and she would always tell us. She would sit there on the couch, you know, and with the TV, her face glowing in the TV, and she would say, you kids should not be watching this, not before bed. And she'd be watching with us, and we'd all watch. And then one night, I remember we went up to the second floor where the bedrooms were, and we were all pretty wound up about what we'd seen. It was that movie, there'd been several versions of it, The Hand, where the two lovers killed the husband, and his hand comes back and strangles everybody. It was that one. So the disembodied hand really had us worked up. So to calm down, my uncle Peter said, let's go out on the balcony and look at the stars through my telescope. And so we were skirmishing over the telescope. Kathleen, my aunt, wanted to turn, and I wanted to turn, and Peter was in the bathroom. And Kathleen, whose turn it was, didn't look through the telescope, but pointed to the gutter along the outside of the balcony and screamed. And so I looked, and creeping along the edge of the gutter, I'm telling you, it was a hand. It was just moving along. And I thought, even in my fright, I thought, if two people see the thing, it's there. And we were screaming, and we both ran in and went downstairs. And Peter came out of the bathroom and collided with us. We were all tumbling downstairs. We go in the kitchen, and we're shivering, and Matt is in there, wiping up the counter. And she says, what? And we told her the whole story. She said, I told you kids, you cannot be watching those movies before bed. Well, now you got to fast forward to she's dead, and my uncle and I are cleaning out the house. And we found the evidence of what she had done. She actually, one Thanksgiving, told me about it. We were talking about the hand incident, and she's sitting in the corner, and she's just like quietly smiling. And I said, "Man, what are you smiling about?" And she said, "Oh, McKay." She said, "Do you remember before Stevie, that was my grandfather, her husband, left, and he got us that rug, that big carpet? Remember when the men came in with it?" And I do remember, because it was two men, and they were carrying it at each end like it was, of course, I thought a corpse, because that was the way I thought as a kid. And they unrolled it, and there was this long bamboo pole in it. And she said, well, McKay, I got one of those kitchen gloves and stuffed a rag in it and put it on the end of that pole and went out in the backyard and was just moving it along the gutter. She probably never would have told us. This was like 20 years after it happened.
I love her.
And so when my uncle and I were cleaning out the basement, we found not only the bamboo pole, but the rubber glove and the rag that she used.
Wow.
Madeline Harlow.
Yeah.
Thanks for teaching lessons.
Thank you for sharing that story. Randy, thank you so much for being on the show with us. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing not only the piece that you wrote, but then just other stories. They're great.
Yeah, they were formative, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks a lot, man.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Benji, Daniel, before we head out for the day, is there anything else y'all want to plug with Gutwrench?
Yeah, so we are currently accepting admissions for our 5th issue, which will be out this summer. So we will be taking submissions until May 15th.
Is there a certain theme for this issue, or are they just kind of open to whatever?
So by the time this podcast comes out, I'm thinking we'll probably have a prompt up on the site.
Okay, cool. That's great.
What we were trying to do this time through is, again, return to workshopping with people, as well as cultivating work and really coaching people through it in order to develop the best work possible.
Do you all just kind of set up the workshops independently or individually, or do you ever do any kind of like monthly or quarterly workshop where people can come hang out and do stuff?
We did at one point, but we've never been able to gather together a group of people. It's better to effectively focus one-on-one.
Yeah, we found that to be more effective and easier to coordinate.
We also found out that if people want to reach out to us, then we usually are good for meeting as well.
Also, it seems like people are more forthcoming one-on-one and more willing to get into their work than in a corporate setting.
Thank you all so much for coming on the show. Benjamin Carr, Daniel Lamb, Randy Osborne, Maddie Fay. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
And for everyone out there, please, don't die dumb.